July 5th, 2015, 2:47 p.m. An Ethiopian journalist living in Virginia picks up his phone. Unknown number. He almost doesn't answer. Hello? The voice on the other end is panicked, whispering, "They found him. Your source in Addis Ababa. He's dead." The line goes dead. 3 hours later, 5:52 p.m. London time, a Saudi women's rights activist disappears from her apartment in Camden. Her laptop is still open. Her tea still warm. Security footage shows 2 men entering her building. They leave 43 minutes later carrying a small suitcase. She is never seen again. That same night in Mexico City, a lawyer defending victims of cartel violence receives an email. No subject line, just an attachment. When he opens it, his blood runs cold. It's a photograph of him, sitting at his desk, taken from inside his own bedroom, through his own webcam, a camera he never knew was active. The email contains 17 more photos, his children, his wife, his parents, all taken without permission, all taken from devices inside his home. None of these people, the journalist, the activist, the lawyer, realize they're connected. They don't know each other. They've never met. They live on different continents, speak different languages, fight different battles, but they share the same nightmare. At this exact moment, someone is uploading 400 gigabytes of stolen files to the internet. Files that will explain everything. Files that will expose how governments murder dissidents with malware. Files that will reveal a global surveillance marketplace worth billions of dollars. The uploader isn't a government, isn't a whistleblower with inside access, isn't a team of elite hackers working for months. It's one person, with one laptop, and a moral compass that wouldn't let him look away. And the insane part? He's still inside their servers right now, watching the company's CEO frantically call the police through the company's own hidden microphones, listening as their entire empire collapses in real time. The company is called Hacking Team. They sell spyware to dictatorships, oppressive regimes, and governments that disappear people who ask too many questions. They just made the mistake of underestimating someone who was broke, angry, and brilliant enough to destroy them. His name, or at least the name he uses, is Phineas Fisher. And this is the true story of how one hacker with nothing to lose pulled off the most devastating corporate breach in history, exposed the dark underbelly of global surveillance, and then vanished without a trace. Before we dive into one of the most insane hacking stories ever told, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and absolutely destroy that hype button to push this story to everyone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment below with your city or country. I love seeing where you're all watching from. This story is wild, and I guarantee by the end, you'll be questioning everything about your digital privacy. Let's get into it. Berlin, Germany. March 2015. The person who would later call himself Phineas Fisher sat in a cramped studio apartment that cost more than he could afford, eating instant ramen for the 4th night in a row, scrolling through news articles about government surveillance. He was 27 years old, broke, no steady job, no prospects, living off freelance programming gigs that paid just enough to cover rent, food, and internet. His apartment was barely 300 square feet, one room serving as bedroom, office, and kitchen. The bathroom was so small you had to close the door to use the toilet. The heating barely worked. In winter, he could see his breath inside. But he had something most people didn't. Skills. He'd been programming since he was 12. Started with simple websites, moved into network security, eventually became obsessed with penetration testing, finding vulnerabilities in systems before the bad guys did. He was good at it. Really good. But really good at hacking doesn't pay the bills when you refuse to work for corporations you consider morally compromised and governments you consider corrupt. So he lived in poverty, survived on ramen, cheap beer, and the occasional programming contract. Spent his free time, which was most of his time, digging through the digital shadows of the internet, looking for something. He didn't know what, just something. He'd been following Hacking Team for months. They were an Italian company based in Milan that developed and sold commercial spyware called Remote Control System, or RCS. Their clients included governments, intelligence agencies, and law enforcement organizations worldwide. On paper, their mission was noble, providing tools to catch terrorists, child predators, organized crime. In reality, they were selling digital weapons to some of the worst human rights violators on the planet. The Ethiopian government used their software to track journalists reporting on government corruption. Those journalists ended up dead or in prison. The Saudi government used it to monitor women's rights activists. Those activists disappeared. The Mexican government used it to spy on lawyers defending cartel victims. Those lawyers received death threats. Hacking Team's software could activate your webcam without the indicator light turning on, record every keystroke you typed, capture your passwords, track your GPS location in real time, copy every file on your computer, record your phone calls, read your encrypted messages before they were encrypted. And the worst part? You'd never know it was there. The software was invisible, undetectable by antivirus programs. It spread through zero-day exploits, vulnerabilities that even software companies didn't know existed. Fisher had read the reports, seen the documentation from human rights organizations, watched as Hacking Team bragged at surveillance conferences about their capabilities, and it made him sick. These people were making millions, tens of millions, helping dictators hunt dissidents, and they were doing it legally. Selling to governments made it legitimate. Fisher lived on instant ramen while these executives ate at Milan's finest restaurants, discussing which oppressive regime to invoice next. One night in March, sitting in his freezing apartment, Fisher made a decision. He was going to destroy them. Not for money, not for fame, not even for recognition. Because someone had to, and because he was broke enough, skilled enough, and angry enough to try. March 2015. Berlin. Fisher started with the basics, open source intelligence, the kind of reconnaissance anyone could do with Google and patience. He searched Hacking Team Network Diagram. He wasn't expecting to find actual network diagrams. That would be insane. But maybe an employee had accidentally posted something. A conference presentation, a technical document, anything. Instead, he found something better, a LinkedIn profile. Some network engineer at Hacking Team, proud of his work, had listed his job history in detail, including specific hardware models the company used, firewall manufacturers, VPN appliances, server configurations. It was like finding the blueprints to a bank vault just sitting on someone's Facebook page. One device caught Fisher's attention. A Sonic Wall VPN appliance, model number, firmware version, everything. He wrote down the specifications, Sonic Wall SSL VPN, firmware 7.0.01, released 2011. Fisher almost laughed out loud. That firmware was 4 years old. 4 years without security updates. 4 years of discovered vulnerabilities that had been patched in newer versions but still existed in this ancient firmware. It was like discovering that Fort Knox was using locks from 1975. For the next 3 weeks, Fisher lived and breathed Sonic Wall vulnerabilities. He couldn't just hack Hacking Team's actual VPN that would tip them off immediately. He needed to test everything safely first. So he built a clean room, an isolated computer environment completely disconnected from any network, a safe place to experiment without leaving traces. Then he went on eBay. He found the exact same Sonic Wall device Hacking Team was using, listed for $89 by some company in Frankfurt, liquidating old equipment. He bought it using a prepaid debit card, had it shipped to a rented mailbox in a different city, picked it up wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses. Paranoia? Maybe. But paranoia keeps you out of prison. Back in his apartment, Fisher set up the device and started probing. He spent 18-hour days testing exploits, trying different approaches, getting rejected by the security features 99 times, finding the one weakness on the 100th attempt, and then he found it. The vulnerability was elegant in its stupidity. The device accepted firmware updates without properly verifying digital signatures. It trusted that any firmware file uploaded to it was legitimate, which meant Fisher could write his own firmware. Malicious firmware, a backdoor disguised as a legitimate update. For the next 11 days, Fisher barely slept. He wrote 147 lines of custom code in C, a backdoor that would maintain all normal VPN functions while secretly opening a port for remote access. The device would work perfectly, routing traffic, authenticating users, running diagnostics, while simultaneously giving Fisher complete control. The hardest part was the failsafe. If hacking team's IT department ran diagnostics, the device had to report normal operations. Every log file had to look legitimate. Every status check had to pass. Fisher programmed his backdoor to hide itself completely unless accessed with a specific cryptographic key only he possessed. By April 10th, he was ready. He'd tested the malicious firmware 100 times on his eBay Sonic wall. It worked flawlessly, invisible, persistent, perfect. Now came the terrifying part, deploying it against hacking team's actual infrastructure. April 12th, 2015. 3:47 a.m. Berlin time. Fisher sat in front of his laptop in the dark, fingers hovering over the keyboard. One window showed the custom exploit code he'd written. Another showed hacking team's public-facing VPN login page. This was the point of no return. Once he launched the attack, there was no taking it back. Either it would work and he'd have access to one of the world's most sophisticated surveillance companies, or it would fail and he'd have alerted them to his presence. He took a deep breath, pressed enter, the exploit executed, his screen filled with output text, connection established, firmware upload initiated, authentication bypassed, installation beginning. For 17 seconds, Fisher counted, hacking team's VPN went offline. Then it came back online, infected. Fisher now controlled the gateway between hacking team's internal network and the outside world. Every employee connecting remotely, every system backup, every external communication, all of it flowed through his compromised device. He was inside. The first thing Fisher did was map the network. He moved slowly, carefully, never pulling so much data that it would trigger bandwidth alarms, never accessing systems at times that would look suspicious. He discovered that hacking team's internal security was shockingly bad. Employee passwords were stored in plain text files, not encrypted, not hashed, just sitting there in readable text documents. One password file contained entries like password 123 P4SS word, Wolverine Universo. The system administrator, the person responsible for protecting a company that sold spyware to intelligence agencies, used P4SS word with a 4 instead of an A. Fisher couldn't believe it. These people sold digital weapons to governments. They bragged about their sophisticated technology. They charged millions for their services, and their internal security was worse than a medium-sized law firm. Over the next 6 weeks, Fisher systematically infiltrated every system hacking team operated. He discovered something fascinating. The company was so paranoid about external threats that they spied on themselves. Every email server had a shadow copy. Every developer workstation streamed screen recordings to a central archive. The Milan office had audio recording devices that captured 3,147 hours of workplace conversations. Executives discussing the Ethiopia problem, whether they could keep selling to a government that was openly killing journalists. Sales directors debating whether selling to Assad's Syria would cross a line or just be another Tuesday. Engineers joking about helping dictatorships while eating lunch. All of it recorded, all of it stored, all of it now accessible to Fisher. But hacking team's paranoia had a fatal flaw. The backup system didn't use encryption. Fisher wrote a script that tunneled the backup drive through his compromised VPN to his own server in Germany. He now had remote access to every backup hacking team had ever made, including a complete virtual machine image of their Microsoft Exchange email server from December 2014. 6 years of corporate emails, every message, every attachment, every conversation about which governments to sell to and how much to charge. Fisher downloaded it all. May 2015. Berlin. Fisher booted the stolen email server on his own hardware in his apartment. The ancient laptop he'd bought used for $200 was now running hacking team's entire email infrastructure. He extracted the password hashes and started cracking them. One hash belonged to Daniele Milan, hacking team's lead developer. Fisher ran the hash through rainbow tables, pre-computed databases of password hashes. The password was password. Are you kidding me? The lead developer at a cybersecurity company used password with a 0. Milan used the same password for everything. including Hacking Team's Git repository, their source code vault. Fisher logged in using Milan's credentials. What he found made him stop breathing for a full 5 seconds. The complete source code for remote control system. Hacking Team's flagship spyware, the tool they sold to governments for millions, the software that had been used to track dissidents, journalists, and activists across 94 countries. All of it, right there, available for download. But there was something else in the code repository, something buried in a folder labeled exploits. A 0-day vulnerability in Adobe Flash. Fisher was a skilled hacker, but even he was shocked by what he was reading. This wasn't just any vulnerability. This was a perfect exploit that worked on every version of Flash, on every operating system, anywhere in the world. Adobe, one of the largest software companies on the planet, had no idea this vulnerability existed. But Hacking Team knew. They'd bought it from a French security researcher for $45,000 3 years ago, and they'd been using it to infect targets ever since. 1.5 billion computers worldwide ran Adobe Flash. This single exploit could potentially infect any of them, and Fisher now had the code. He sat back in his chair staring at the screen, understanding the weight of what he discovered. If he released this, Adobe would be forced to patch it within hours. The exploit would be burned, useless. Hacking Team would lose one of their most valuable weapons, a tool worth more than most people's houses. But if he didn't release it, how many more people would be infected? How many more dissidents tracked? How many more journalists killed? The decision was already made. He just needed to accept it. Fisher kept digging. He used credentials from Christian Posse, Hacking Team's domain administrator, to access emails that were supposed to auto-delete after 30 days. One email thread from February 2015 showed CEO David Vincenzetti arguing with his sales director about a $3 million deal with Egypt's Interior Ministry. Sales director: "They're using it on the Muslim Brotherhood, not terrorists." Vincenzetti: "I don't see the distinction. Invoice them." Fisher downloaded Hacking Team's financial database. The customer list read like a human rights violation bingo card. Azerbaijan's Ministry of National Security, Kazakhstan's KNB, Saudi Arabia's Intelligence Directorate, Ethiopia's Information Network Security Agency, Bahrain's Ministry of Interior, Morocco's Security Services. One entry stopped him cold. Sudan status: active Sudan was under UN sanctions. Selling them surveillance technology was illegal. International crime. But the invoice trail showed Hacking Team had routed payments through a shell company in Panama. Clean, untraceable, profitable. Beside each client name were purchase dates, renewal fees, and a column labeled infection capacity, how many people each government could simultaneously spy on. Sudan, 500 targets. Morocco, 600 targets. Ethiopia, 1,000 targets. Saudi Arabia, 200 targets. Each number represented real people: journalists, activists, lawyers, teachers, protesters, people whose only crime was speaking truth to power, and Hacking Team was making millions helping governments silence them. Fisher wrote a script to search the 689,432 emails for specific keywords: journalist, activist, opposition, human rights, dissident. The search returned 8,156 results. He started reading. One email chain from 2013 showed Hacking Team's engineers providing step-by-step instructions to Ethiopian intelligence on how to infect a journalist living in Virginia. The same journalist who would receive that phone call on July 5th about his source being found dead. The emails included screenshots, technical guidance, advice on bypassing Gmail's security features. "Make the email personal," one engineer wrote. "Reference something from their recent articles. Make them feel like it's from a trusted source." Another email thread contained 37 messages about targeting Bahraini protesters during the 2014 Arab Spring uprising. A Hacking Team technician joked, "At least we're not selling to ISIS yet." LOL. Someone replied, "Give it time." Fisher felt sick reading these exchanges. These weren't military professionals fighting terrorism. These were tech bros in Milan treating human rights violations like a joke while collecting million-euro contracts. But the worst discovery was in the targeting database. hacking team maintained active infections on 47,000 devices across 94 countries. The database included names, email addresses, phone numbers, and GPS coordinates. Fisher scrolled through the list. Journalists in Mexico investigating cartels, lawyers in Thailand defending protesters, teachers in Turkey organizing unions, bloggers in Saudi Arabia criticizing the government, human rights activists in Bahrain documenting abuses. Each entry included the infection date, data collected, and which government was watching. One target in Malaysia had been monitored for 1,147 consecutive days. Every text message, every phone call, every email, every Google search for 3.5 years. Fisher found entries for people he recognized from news articles, activists he'd read about, journalists whose work he admired, all of them being watched, tracked, monitored, without their knowledge, without warrants, without any legal oversight, and the people watching them were paying hacking team millions for the privilege. June 2015, Berlin. Fisher sat in his apartment surrounded by hard drives containing 389 gigabytes of evidence. He had everything: source code, financial records, client lists, emails, the Adobe Flash zero-day, training videos, targeting databases. Everything needed to expose hacking team completely, but he faced an impossible problem. Releasing this data would burn his access. Once hacking team realized they'd been breached, they'd shut down everything, change all passwords, lock him out, destroy evidence he hadn't yet stolen. He needed to make sure his one shot counted. Then he found something in an encrypted folder labeled insurance. Emails between hacking team and an FSB colonel, Russian intelligence, discussing a custom version of their spyware designed to survive iPhone factory resets. The price, $2.4 million. The delivery date, August 2015. This deal hasn't happened yet. If Fisher waited until August, he could capture evidence of hacking teams selling to Russia. That would be massive. International scandal material. But waiting meant more journalists would be infected, more dissidents tracked, more people killed. Every day he delayed, someone else became a target. Fisher made his decision. He couldn't wait. Too many people were being hurt right now. What he didn't know was that hacking team's engineers had started noticing anomalies. Storage systems accessing files at unusual hours. Network traffic to IP addresses in countries where they had no clients. In 72 hours, they'd run a security audit that would expose his backdoor. The clock he didn't know existed was ticking toward zero. Sunday, July 5, 2015, 11:31 p.m. Berlin time. Fisher chose Sunday night for maximum chaos. Hacking team's Milan office closed at 6 p.m. on Fridays. Didn't reopen until 9 a.m. Monday. That gave him 39 hours before anyone with authority could respond. He'd prepared meticulously. The 400 GB dump was split across 50 seed boxes, high-speed servers scattered across Europe and Asia. Each server had gigabit connections capable of spreading the leak faster than any takedown notice could travel. The torrent file was ready. The data was organized. The evidence was overwhelming. All he had to do was press enter. Fisher looked at the screen one last time. Once he did this, there was no going back. He'd be hunted, investigated. Every intelligence agency in the world would want to know who'd pulled this off. But out there, right now, 47,000 devices were infected. Journalists were being tracked. Activists were being monitored. People were in danger. He pressed enter. The torrent uploaded to all 50 seed boxes simultaneously. Within seconds, the swarm began growing. Peers connecting, downloading, sharing. Then Fisher did something nobody expected. He logged into Hacking Team's Twitter account using credentials he'd pulled from their marketing director's email. He typed the message that would destroy them. "Since we have nothing to hide, we're publishing all our emails, files, and source code. Download it all here. Torrent link." He hit tweet. Then he sat back and watched the world catch fire. The first retweet came from WikiLeaks 12 minutes later. Then the Intercept's Micah Lee. Then Edward Snowden. Within an hour, 400,000 people had seen the tweet. The torrent swarm grew to 8,000 peers. then 15,000, then 30,000. Tech reporters in San Francisco waking up to Sunday breakfast received alerts from sources. Download this now before it disappears. Security researchers across the globe started digging through the files. And Fisher? He was still watching through his back door, observing hacking team systems from the inside, waiting for Monday morning when someone would discover what he'd done. Monday, July 6, 2015. 6:47 a.m. Milan time. Christian Posey arrived at hacking team's office 3 hours early. The night security guard had called him. Something's wrong with the Twitter account. Posey checked his phone, saw the tweet, assumed it was a prank. Then he checked the torrent contents. His own emails were in folder 3, including the one where he'd called a client technically incompetent and suggested charging them triple because they won't know the difference. He tried damage control, tweeted warnings about viruses in the leaked files. Don't download, malware. Nobody believed him. Fisher, still watching through his back door, saw Posey's attempts. He hijacked Posey's personal Twitter account and deleted it. A system administrator with 20 years of experience had just gotten owned twice in one morning by the same hacker, using his own password, P4SSword. The most damaging revelation surfaced within 4 hours. Security researcher Carrie Balakrishnan discovered the Adobe Flash 0-day in Hacking Team's exploit folder. She tweeted proof of concept code at 3:45 p.m. Milan time. Within minutes, criminal hackers were weaponizing it. The Angler exploit kit, used by ransomware gangs worldwide, incorporated the vulnerability by midnight. Adobe's security team, on holiday for July 4th weekend, received emergency calls. Executives, board members, everyone panicking. They'd push an unscheduled patch to 1.5 billion computers within 36 hours, the fastest emergency response in company history. But the damage was done. For those 36 hours, every computer running Flash was vulnerable. And now every hacker in the world knew exactly how to exploit it. Italy's postal police arrived at Hacking Team's office at 11:00 a.m. Monday. CEO David Vincenzetti met them in a conference room where, 5 months earlier, he demonstrated their spyware to representatives from Turkmenistan's intelligence service. The police asked basic questions. Who has access to your systems? When did you last change passwords? Do you have a list of employees with administrative privileges? Vincenzetti couldn't answer any of them, because the spreadsheet with that information was now public, available for download by anyone with an internet connection. While he spoke to police, journalists worldwide were reading his emails about avoiding export controls, inflating prices, and selling to sanctioned governments. The Italian government reacted within 72 hours. The Ministry of Economic Development suspended Hacking Team's global export license, cutting off 90% of their revenue. Stock analysts estimated the company lost $17 million in contracted sales within the first week. Employees started resigning when their personal information, including home addresses, salary details, and performance reviews, appeared on Pastebin and was searchable by anyone. One developer, whose password was Warcraft123, couldn't find another job for 8 months. Every potential employer Googled his name and found his terrible security practices published online. 3 governments canceled active operations based on Hacking Team surveillance. Morocco shut down a 2-year investigation into suspected terrorists when defense lawyers proved the evidence came from illegal spyware. Mexico's Attorney General dropped charges against 14 cartel members after forensic analysis showed their phones had traces of remote control system infections, making all evidence potentially inadmissible. The Lebanese government claimed their Hacking Team licenses were for testing purposes only, despite leaked emails showing 127 active targets, including 3 members of parliament. Fisher maintained his access throughout the chaos. He watched through Hacking Team's own surveillance system as the company held crisis meetings. He recorded Vincenzetti telling his board, "We're finished. Even if we survive legally, no government will trust us again. We're radioactive." The CEO, who'd built a company on violating privacy, had his most private moment of defeat captured by his own tools. The irony was perfect. But the leaked files contained something nobody expected. Not even Fisher. Buried in email attachments from 2012, technical specifications for surveillance tools that made Hacking Team look like amateurs. Journalists digging through the leak discovered Hacking Team was actually a medium-sized player in a market worth $12 billion annually. Their client list included 37 governments, but competitors like NSO Group, Gamma International, and Celebrite sold to over 100. One leaked PowerPoint from a surveillance technology conference showed a pyramid diagram. Top tier, Five Eyes intelligence agencies, US, UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. Second tier, companies like Hacking Team selling to regional powers. Bottom tier, criminal organizations using stolen versions. The same tools flowing down the pyramid, just with different price tags. The system was bigger than Fisher had imagined. He destroyed one company. But dozens more existed, selling the same capabilities to the same dictatorships for the same reasons. The Ethiopia revelations triggered immediate consequences. Citizen Lab, a research group at the University of Toronto, analyzed the leaked targeting database and identified 23 journalists infected across 6 countries. They contacted each victim within 48 hours. Tadesse Kersmo, an Ethiopian journalist living in London, learned he'd been monitored since 2013. Every source he'd spoken to, every document he'd received, every movement he'd made, all captured. 3 of his sources in Addis Ababa had been arrested 2 weeks after he'd interviewed them by phone. Now he knew how the government found them. The Saudi Arabia targeting list included 764 active infections. Cross-referencing phone numbers with public records revealed the victims. Women's rights activists, Shia clerics, foreign workers organizing for better conditions. LGBTQ+ individuals in hiding. Journalists covering corruption. One target marked priority in the database was a teenage blogger with 50,000 Twitter followers. His infection date was the day after he'd posted about poverty in Riyadh. The malware had captured his drafts folder, posts he'd been too frightened to publish. Saudi intelligence saw his private thoughts before he could self-censor. Fisher released a second torrent on July 8th, containing 63 gigabytes he'd initially held back. This included Hacking Team's training videos, 40 hours of employees teaching government agents how to violate privacy laws. In one session, a trainer explained how to write infection emails, mention their children by name, include a photo from their social media, make it emotional. Fear or curiosity work best. He demonstrated on a fake target, crafting a message about a school emergency involving the target's daughter. The government students took notes like they were in a college lecture. The financial records exposed the economics of surveillance. Hacking Team's pricing, base package, $45,000, 3 infections. Each additional target, $11,000 annual maintenance, $27,000 optional modules. WhatsApp interception, $15,000 Skype recording, $15,000 GPS tracking, $8,000 webcam activation, $12,000 one invoice to Egypt's Interior Ministry, totaled $3.4 million for a public safety suite capable of monitoring 600 people simultaneously. Payment terms, net 90. Like they were selling office supplies instead of oppression tools. 6 months after the leak, 8,000 Hacking Team infections remained active, pinging servers that no longer belonged to the company. Security researchers called them orphan implants, spyware that outlived its creator. 3 criminal organizations claimed to control portions of this ghost network. They auctioned access on dark web forums, Ethiopian government targets, 50 Bitcoin per device, Saudi activist phones, 75 Bitcoin per device. The surveillance state's tools had become commodities in a digital black market. Phineas Fisher published a 16,000-word technical guide explaining exactly how he'd hacked Hacking Team. He included source code, screenshots, and step-by-step instructions. The message was explicit. Anyone with intermediate programming skills can topple a surveillance company. Within 6 months, 4 similar breaches occurred. Celebrite lost 900 gigabytes of data. Gamma International's Fisher spyware got leaked. 2 smaller vendors quietly shut down rather than risk exposure. The guide became required reading in computer science programs at MIT, Stanford, and Tsinghua University. Italy's investigation into the breach concluded without arrests. Prosecutors identified 16 potential suspects across 9 countries, but couldn't determine which one was Fisher. The hackers' operational security was flawless. Tor for all connections, cryptocurrency for all purchases, fake identities for all accounts. No reused passwords, no traceable mistakes. One investigator admitted off the record, "We have gigabytes of evidence showing what he did, but nothing showing who he is." Hacking teams spent $4 million on forensic analysis that yielded 3 words: unknown threat actor. The company attempted resurrection as Memento Labs in 2016. They claimed to have learned from past mistakes and implemented industry-leading security. Their first client meeting leaked within hours. Fisher, or someone inspired by him, apparently maintained persistent access. The rebrand failed. By 2017, key employees had scattered to competitors or left the industry entirely. David Vincenzetti sold his stake for 2% of its peak value. In his final interview, he said, "One person with a laptop destroyed everything we built over 13 years. Today in 2025, Phineas Fisher has never been identified." Spanish police raided an apartment in Helva in 2019, finding sophisticated computer equipment, but no occupant. The trail went cold. Fisher's last confirmed communication was in 2016, offering a $100,000 bounty for anyone who hacks oil companies or banks. Nobody claimed it. Some believe he's in Latin America. Others think Southeast Asia. A few think he's dead. The truth? Nobody knows.